If you have memories of your early childhood, as I do, I have memories of my early childhood. In fact, I remember them as if I was just talking about them a minute ago. I remember them so clearly that I can remember talking through them and then noticing that I wasn't recording. So, we'll abandon the bit where I link it into the Smurfs, because I had been talking about the Smurfs and I was comparing them to the blue people in Avatar, who I discuss elsewhere in this work. I was comparing the Smurfs unfavourably to the Avatar people, because they are inferior. There's no two ways about this. The characters depicted in the Smurfs, who thankfully don't exist, if they did exist, they would be inferior to the characters depicted in the movie Avatar. Now, I know they're all fictional anyway, but nonetheless. My memory of the Smurfs goes back to the 1980s when I was a child. I was a child well into the 1990s, I would argue. I was a child in the late 1970s as well. I remember waking up in a hospital at age 2 or 3, looking up and seeing 2 nuns or nurses in old-fashioned, religious-looking garb. It may have been either nurses or nursing nuns or some shit like that. And I remember waking up, finding that I was restrained by some sort of thing in my hospital cot, or whatever they put children in when they've just had their hernia fixed. And I remember these 2 people talking and then looking around to notice that I'd come undone, and then one of them coming over to strap me down again. Now that may be, I was in hospital at an early age, having hernia operations. It just occurred to me, maybe that memory is some sort of interpretation of when I was abducted by aliens or something. It never occurred to me until this moment that I might have been abducted by aliens. But you hear this a lot. You hear people, they're being abducted by aliens, but their memory gets disguised as something. It turns into a memory where they're driving along a road and they hit some animal or something, and all sorts of other things. So it's possible, I suppose, that the people who supposedly operated on my early childhood hernias, plural, because there was at least 2, I suppose it's quite unlikely. Doesn't bother me either way. I still have the scar, incidentally, so whatever they were doing, it was down around my waist somewhere. And I think I remember not being able to speak and being rather frustrated by it. My father recording me not speaking onto his tape recorder, as he often did, and listening back and being rather frustrated that all my words were coming out garbled and making no sense. I remember there being a period of being able to talk but not make sense, and I came out garbled, like a foreign language. And then at some point there was a breakthrough and I was speaking English like a normal person. And that's when I started to emerge as a member of society. Presumably I was about 3, I don't know. When do you start to speak properly? Is it 3? When do you start to speak coherently? 2 or 3, I suppose. When do you start saying stuff that's worth saying? I suppose that depends on the person. That depends on the person. The criminal experts and the detectives, the honest ones, will tell you that human memory is extremely unreliable, and there's a good chance that everything that's in your head from anything in the past is all just bullshit that you've inadvertently made up. Nothing is real. It's like Lego World. And you go into Lego now, and there's no such thing as bricks anymore. There's games and there's movies that are made from imaginary Lego bricks or something. Apparently there's a Lego Batman movie. The whole world set in this movie, or supposedly everything's made from Lego or something, and there's a Batman in it, but he's not the Batman in our world. He's a different Batman, made from bricks. We all know anyone who's ever played Lego. The men in the Lego sets that we get, now I haven't had one in some years, but they're not really made of bricks at all. They have a torso, and you have legs that come off, but there's no point them coming off, because it's not like you're going to build something else out of them. You're not going to take apart a Lego man and use the hands to make part of a fence. I suppose the head, you could use that. If you're going to have roadworks, you could use the head as a kind of bollard. But you need a lot of Lego men for that. So I suppose, yes, you could reassemble them in that, but you can't do much with the arms. Once you take them off, the Lego man is kind of nearly almost broken. So no, you wouldn't disassemble the Lego man. So to say that the Lego Batman is made from Lego isn't really accurate, no. At best, he's a Lego man that came with a Lego set and he happens to be Batman. I don't know. Even then, it's not the real Batman. And even if it was the real Batman, it would be played by an actor anyway. So you have a Lego Batman, presumably someone voicing it. They don't build a voice out of Lego. If anything, that would be Meccano. When I was into Lego as a child, my sibling was into Meccano. He was older and into kind of engineering stuff and mechanical stuff, so he had Meccano. Now, Meccano was a depressing older person's alternative to Lego, because you get this box. It's all screws and nuts and bolts and cold, unfriendly strips of metal with holes in them. You put them together, or you could buy a little motor that you could use to make something. And make something that's nowhere near as cheerful as Lego, I can tell you. Now, can you have a Meccano Batman, I wonder? I don't know. I don't remember there being figurines of people in Meccano. You could certainly build stuff. You had a screwdriver and nuts and bolts. You could construct a horrible-looking metal toy digger or crane or something out of Meccano. Oh, it's a bit too practical. No child should be playing with Meccano. That's ridiculous. Play with Lego. Meccano was like giving a child a few bits of wood and saying, you're a carpenter now. You're not a carpenter now. You're a child. You should be playing with stuff, not using real stuff. We're going to give you a job as a metalwork operator as a 12-year-old, and that's your recreation. No, that's no way to bring up a child. No, don't do that to your child. Give them Lego. And then when they're too old for the Lego, take the Lego off them and give it to your next younger child. Space your children 5 years apart. Have a proper system of hand-me-downs. So you get your Lego that's for 8 to 12-year-olds. Let them play with it for 4 years, and then you rest the Lego in the attic for a year. And then repackage it, perhaps. Perhaps Lego should issue new packaging so that parents who wish to hand down their old Lego can purchase new packaging, repackage it as a something, whatever. So it's, I don't know, so it matches the younger person's taste, because young people's tastes change very quickly. So if you're handing your Lego down from your first child to your second and third child, who might be 5 or 10 years apart, but you want to repackage it so it appeals to the new child, I don't mean you should be embarrassed at handing it down. No, you're just making it appeal to the child. They could charge you a small fee for the new packaging. I think that would be reasonable. If you don't think that would be reasonable, feel free not to do it. That's fine. Who am I to tell you how to raise your child? I presume you're doing a perfectly adequate job as it is without my input. And if you're not, the authorities can step in. It's not my place. If you're not doing an adequate job of raising your child, there's no point me telling you what to do in that case, because it's not like you're going to recognise that you're not doing an adequate job. No. If you're not doing an adequate job of raising your child, you're probably thinking right now that you are. So you're thinking, oh, this is hilarious. He's going to tell inadequate parents what they should do if they realise they're inadequate. Oh, I wonder what he's going to say. And you're completely unself-aware, so you think it's not about you. So let's just say it's not about you. If you're an inadequate parent, as I am, I'm an inadequate parent in that I haven't produced any children, but there are no children suffering from my inadequacy. Well, unless you think there's some children who haven't come into existence and they're in some void somewhere. Like that early episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. Some alien fella who's kind of godlike and he's doing experiments on the crew and he puts what's-her-name into some void and she's told if anyone else breaks the rules, they're going to be put into the void. But there's only room in the void for one person, so you'll become non-existent then to make room for that. She gets all upset about it. Captain Picard comforts her like she's some lost child. And she's supposedly the head of security. Well, it's like that. My children that I've never had are in some void somewhere. Well, that's fine. They don't mind. I raised them to not care whether they exist or not, so it's fine. Don't worry about that at all. It's perfectly fine. Perfectly fine.
Into your head. Into your head. Into your head. Into your head. Into your head.
If you're listening to this during the month of July, apparently you're quite a rare breed. You're quite a rare breed because nobody listens to podcasts during July. At least that's what I've been led to believe by podcasts I listen to about podcasting. They say, nobody listens to podcasts in July. They'll run through. They say, people listen to podcasts in January. People listen to podcasts in February. Although it seems like they're not listening because there's fewer days for them to listen on. There's significantly fewer days in February for people to listen to podcasts on. Especially if there's one of those Februaries that has fewer weekends than the average month. Depends on how it works out, I suppose. So if you're a podcast that people listen to on weekdays during their commute, sometimes you get a month that has 5 weekends in it, which is overkill. That would be worse than a February for some podcast. You might have a show that's about commuting, but it's for people who don't commute because you want to see how the other half lives, I suppose. Same reason you'd listen to a travel show where someone talks about their travels. You'd watch Michael Palin going into North Korea, telling you all about the train he got and how he had to go through customs and be interviewed and be watched and stuff. And you go, oh, that's fascinating. Except it wasn't fascinating. I watched Michael Palin's North Korea documentary. It's one of the most tedious, boring travel documentaries I've seen in my life, especially the first 20 minutes or so. Oh, look, I'm on a train, just like any other train, except it's a train going into North Korea. And I'm looking out the window now, and look, that's North Korea over there out through the window. You look out through the window and all you see is a reflection of the camera in the window. And you see Michael Palin. He's looking into the camera, so you see a reflection of him in the camera, in the window, in the camera, in the window, in the camera. I presume you do anyway. Wasn't really watching it very closely. More listening than watching. I suppose watching it with my ears. That's a phrase I used to use a lot. If the TV was on and I was falling asleep or I was interested in the content and the vision wasn't really necessary, you'd be watching these comedy panel shows or these stand-up comedy shows or some program that's just interviews. You don't need to be watching it. You just listen to it. So I call that watching it with my ears. You can rest your eyes while you're doing that. And that's good. That's good. And the other people in the room can watch it with their eyes if they want, if that's what they need. Because different people have different needs regarding visual stimulation. That's why nowadays when people decorate their homes, they don't just paint everything the same colour. They have one wall in each room that's a different colour, or that doesn't have wallpaper, or it does have wallpaper, or it has panelling that's different from the rest of the room. I say, oh, this is all planned. It wasn't an accident. We intentionally made it non-uniform because we think that's important. I say they think that's important, so something can be a focal point or maybe be a non-focal point. You have one wall that's particularly blank. And I say that's not a focal point except when you're using it as your home cinema, in which case you use that blank wall as a screen. And then it is a focal point. Now, of course, in the future, they'll be able to abolish physical decoration entirely. You'll have a switch on the wall to adjust the decor for different purposes. I'm using this room as a sitting room at the moment for entertainment, so let's have our entertaining decor up. And then now I'm using it for an on-the-fly criminal trial of some fella we just found in our house. We had a party last night and we found this fella lying dead on the stairs. And we found another fella running down the stairs carrying a knife covered in blood. So we're having a trial now about that. And of course, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. That's just an example. That's just a hypothetical example. There's no stabbings going on in these houses. People who go to the trouble of decorating their homes so much that they can flick a switch and change the decor, they spend all of their waking hours thinking about that stuff. So they're not going to be having murderers and things. They don't have time for that shit. their life is too full of decorating, and they spend their weekend at the DIY store. They go down to the DIY shop. Probably go to Woody's. They go into Woody's. It's a chain of big DIY shops here. Go into a branch of Woody's. First thing you do when you go into a branch of Woody's is go, I need a piss. Because invariably a branch of Woody's is on a big business park campus of big stores like that. And at the entrance to that campus, there's a McDonald's or a KFC. In fact, it's often a KFC. Because KFC is so shit here that you have to put it somewhere where there are no other fast food options available. So you'll often find it's at the entrance to a business park like that. It has big DIY shops and big furniture shops and things, and it's kind of out on the edge of town and there's nothing else. So KFC is your only option. That's why KFC flourishes in this country, because they put it where there's nothing else. I used to live in South County Kildare. We used to go to a town called Newbridge that had a drive-through KFC, weirdly located right next to a drive-through McDonald's. And somehow both survived. The KFC seemed to be going perfectly fine. And I recently heard a couple of years ago that McDonald's burnt down. The drive-through McDonald's in Newbridge burnt down. Some car went on fire in the drive-through, and the places had to close down. People lost their jobs. It's being rebuilt, I presume. But there was a KFC next to that, and that's the luckiest KFC in this country ever. For some reason, it had been managing to do business even while being located right beside a McDonald's. That's just weird. And now the McDonald's is gone, so they have all of that now. There are people who seem to like KFC. I don't understand it. I don't understand that at all. I think there's something wrong with you. Now, I know in America, you may be thinking KFC is fine. KFC is different in different countries. The KFC in Ireland is shit. Anything you buy from KFC, the minute you take it out of the packaging, it smells like something you got in Burger King 3 days ago that's been sitting in the car. And it's not edible. You don't eat that. Don't put that in your mouth. Maybe you've got a dog and you'd like to go to KFC when you have your dog with you in the car because the dog happens to like one of their chicken things that they sell. I don't know. Maybe that's it. I don't know. I know they sell corn on the cob, which is a vegetable in KFC. That's a thing. They sell gravy, which is quite unusual. Gravy is something you make at home or you get in some... Oh, you don't get it in some fancy restaurant. They'd make it sauce. You wouldn't say, oh, here's your dish. You want some gravy because it's completely unedible unless you cover it with gravy. No, they'd provide a sauce to make it seem edible. And if you're at home, you eat gravy because your cooking is shit, so you drown it in gravy. And not in a fast food place. You go to a fast food place to eat stuff that's nice. It doesn't need to have gravy poured over it. So why they have gravy in a KFC drive-thru, I don't know. But suffice to say they do. They do.
Into your head.
Now I know what you're thinking there. You're thinking, those people from the McDonald's that burned down, they probably got a job in the KFC next door straight away. So that's fine. That's what you're probably thinking. Because you live in this world where you watch TV and everything's wrapped up with a little bow for you and it's all nice and tidy and you don't have to worry about everything. You watch some true crime program and it all gets wrapped up with everyone getting caught and everyone going off to prison and everyone who is murdered gets brought back to life or something or whatever it is happens. What happens in these true crime shows that justifies you watching it for enjoyment? That's what I want to know. The only way you could justify watching true crime for enjoyment is if something happens whereby the producers of this documentary or true crime podcast or whatever it is find some way to reverse the crime and improve the circumstances of the people who were victims of this crime, whereby you bring them back to life perhaps. Or you make it so they never experience it at all. Or you turn back time and that justifies you making a documentary about it. Is that what happens? Maybe it is. Maybe I've misjudged these shows. I don't watch a lot of true crime. I've watched it occasionally. I watched one the other day. I very, 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 very rarely watch this shit. But there was one the other day on Sky documentaries. It was about this man. His parents and this man, they ran a dodgy crematorium and got up to all sorts of dark shit. And he was unrepentant at the end. There's 3 episodes of this. It was fascinating and dark and shocking. And you end up at the end where he says, oh, he's gone to jail for 3 years or something, and he gets out. He's still unrepentant, and he seems to be kind of hinting that he's murdered some people or done some other shit that he's got away with. And that's how it ends. And you're watching that. And presumably as someone who enjoys this shit, you go, oh, that's great. That fella, he murders some people probably. I think he did loads of other cool shit. Isn't that great? Isn't that? That's what you're thinking. You're thinking, isn't that great? I fantasize about doing that. I want to be a murderer, you think. You think, I want to be a murderer, but I can't because I'm afraid of the cops and I'm afraid of jail. So I'm going to get my thrills by watching someone else who murdered other real people in real life. Go watch an episode of Criminal Minds. That's what that shit is for. Watch Criminal Minds or Law and Order or Hill Street Blues or some other fictional shit. Now, I know I watched that. I actually quite enjoyed the experience of watching that, but I very, 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 very rarely watch real crime. I watch documentaries. I rarely watch real crime. Because if you're watching real crime, there's something wrong with you. You're a sick puppy, and not in a good way. I know some of you dog owners, you see a sick puppy, and you think, oh, that's so cute. This sick, twisted little puppy, he's vomiting because he's eaten the cat or something. He's vomiting. He's projectile vomiting across the room, going, bleh, bleh, bleh. Look at me, I'm vomiting. Woof, I'm a cute puppy. You go, oh, isn't that great? A cute little puppy. He's vomiting. Perhaps when he gets it out of his system, he'll train to be a police sniffer dog one day and he'll be able to sniff vomit. How will that help anyone? I don't know. Unless you're searching for some serial killer whose signature is that he likes to leave his own vomit at the scene. He likes to leave the impression that his crimes are so sick that he makes himself vomit and he leaves his own vomit. Well, we all know he's not really leaving his own vomit. Well, he is leaving his own vomit, but he's putting 2 fingers down his throat and he's forcing himself to vomit artificially. His crimes don't make him sick. If they did, he wouldn't be doing it. So no, he murders someone, does his next little serial killer event, and then he leaves a signature by putting 2 fingers down his throat and making himself vomit, and then he leaves vomit at the scene, and that's his signature. And he's known as the vomit killer. And people watching documentaries about that probably think, oh, he has a bit of a heart because he feels guilty. He's so shocked at what he's done, he vomits. So maybe he can be saved. No, he can't be saved. He's a sick bastard. And not in a proper medical way because he's not even properly sick. He's forcing himself to vomit, but he's not sick. That's not sick. Real sickness is where you actually vomit uncontrollably, not where you do it by choice. So he's sick in some way, but not in a vomiting way. He doesn't have a vomiting bug. So if you're thinking, this fella, in his defense, he has a vomiting bug. No, he doesn't. If he did, he wouldn't be doing this chain of serial killings that goes on for years. Although maybe he gets the vomiting bug regularly, and every time he catches the vomiting bug, maybe once a year when it's the season for that, maybe that's when he kills. I don't know. That seems unlikely, doesn't it? It does seem unlikely. I don't know how vomiting bugs work. I don't know how serial killers work, but it seems unlikely. But that fella's leaving vomit at every scene. And it's his own... Oh, we're assuming that... We may be wrong. We're assuming that it's his vomit. It mightn't be his vomit at all. Now, obviously, we'll know by testing whether it's the same person's vomit he leaves at every scene. Presume you can test for that. That doesn't necessarily mean it's his vomit. And it's not the victim's vomit because it's a different victim every time, and the vomit isn't different every time. So there's that. So you'd know that. I don't know. I presume at some point, if they gather enough evidence, they figure out that he's getting the vomit from somewhere. Maybe he's got an assistant he brings with him who vomits for him. Maybe he brings a member of his family unwillingly and makes them watch and they vomit at every scene and they're somehow not able to get away from him to report it. Maybe the vomit is from another victim he's keeping in the basement somewhere as his vomit proxy. And he's feeding him an hour before they go out and making sure he vomits. I don't know. Is he putting his own fingers down his vomit proxy's throat then? Or is he getting the vomit proxy to put his fingers down his own throat? Or is he just got a proxy who happens to vomit a lot? I don't know. Or does he artificially infect his vomit proxy victim with the vomiting bug? Can you keep the vomiting bug in a lab somewhere, like you do with the Black Plague or wherever they have that? They have that in a lab somewhere. Can you keep the vomiting bug in a lab somewhere? And would this fella have a lab? Or would a murderer set up a lab just to keep a supply of the vomiting bug? That seems like overkill. Well, of course, killers often do overkill. But usually when they do overkill, if my understanding from Criminal Minds is right, if a serial killer goes into overkill, that means they're about to expose themselves. They're about to get caught because they can no longer restrain themselves. So I suppose in a way that's good. They're going to get caught then. So that's good. That's good. If you ever have an opportunity to open up a Rubiks Cube and look at the inner workings. Now I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt here and assume that you're not doing this for the purposes of cheating, because it is possible to pretend you solved the Rubiks Cube by simply disassembling it and reassembling it in its original form where it hasn't been scrambled yet and all the colours are where they would be when the Rubiks Cube is solved. For you young people, in the 1980s we used to do puzzles with our hands. We had the big cube that was made up of 27 blocks formed in the shape of a cube. Each side of each cube had a particular colour and it was considered solved when all of the colours matched on one side. You could start off with a perfectly solved Rubiks Cube, which is how it came in the box. And if you wanted, you could go around telling everyone, look, I solved this Rubiks Cube, isn't it great? Or of course, nobody's going to believe you. Nobody's going to believe you. They'll say, that's how it comes in the box. It comes solved. And of course, you'll say to that, what's the point of a puzzle that arrives solved? That's stupid. That's like a crossword puzzle arriving where all the letters filled in. And you do a crossword in a newspaper. Today's crossword comes out and it's blank and it has all the clues. You fill in your answers in the box in the crossword. And then the next day's newspaper, they provide the correct answers. It's possible to solve a crossword 100% and still have all of the wrong answers. You could have all of the wrong answers, the ones that aren't provided in the solutions, but he could still have managed to fill in the crossword completely and not seem to have any problems. So if you do solve a crossword fully, you still need to check the answers the next day when they're issued in the next day's newspaper to make sure you did the right answers and that you didn't just get lucky. I suppose it's a perfectly legitimate way to do a crossword. Just happens that they issue questions and clues to which there are 2 correct answers and you happen to come up with all of the answers that they didn't have in mind. You're effectively in a parallel universe. You managed to perfectly fill in all the clues, everything matches, there's nothing that doesn't link up, the words all managed to intersect with each other without any difficulties, and yet you've got a whole different set of answers to the ones that were intended by the crossword setter. Nobody's in the wrong in that case. If you did that in good faith, I suppose a good crossword setter would realise that there were 2 possible answers to all these questions and would provide 2 sets of solutions. You can't be expected to know which of the 2 solutions is the right ones that they have in mind. So there's no correct answer there. There's 2 correct answers. Oh yes, it's the crossword setter's fault for not being thorough enough in that case. So yes, I take that back. Now with a Rubiks Cube, you can take apart a Rubiks Cube. Now I did this accidentally as a child. And then I did it a couple of times intentionally and then another time accidentally, and then I was never able to put the Rubiks Cube back together again. It was the Humpty Dumpty of my childhood games box. I destroy the Rubik's Cube by doing this. If you open up a Rubik's Cube, there's all sorts of clever gadgets inside it. There's cubes attached to things that are designed to rotate in every direction. There's a kind of a ball thing in the middle, if I remember rightly. You don't want to take the colours off, I think, because they're glued on. It's hard to reattach them properly. You can take each square off. Ideally, you don't want to do that either. The inside of a Rubik's Cube looks much like molecular structure as shown in a biology book. You have all these little round things connected by straight things, basically. It looks like it could be a molecular structure diagram. And of course it's not. It's not that at all. It's a puzzle. And someone solved it at some point in the 1980s. And then everyone says, oh Christ, it's all done now. And they all dumped their Rubik's Cube. If you look in any landfill from the 1980s, you're going to find thousands and thousands of unsolved Rubik's Cubes. You won't find any solved ones. I don't think I ever solved the Rubik's Cube other than by cheating. It wasn't like I was entering some competition where there's rules and people have put down a deposit and has implications for other people if I cheat. No, you're cheating on myself. There's no rules in playing with yourself. There isn't. You're entitled to do whatever you want to your own Rubik's Cube in the privacy of your own home. You're perfectly entitled to do that, and don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. Nowadays, you young people, you probably have some sort of electronic Rubik's Cube reproduced in an app or something. Have you? You probably have. Look on your phone now, see if there's some Rubik's Cube app. I'm not going to look, because that would be too depressing. That would be too depressing to find. Everything from my earlier life is now available in app form. Apps aren't real. That's just a visual representation of something that used to exist in the 1980s. If you're playing Rubik's Cube on an app, that's fake. You're a fake and a fraud, and you're living in a virtual bastardization of the real world. It's not real at all. You might as well just not be getting out of bed at all and just having an avatar. Like in that movie. That movie by your man who made Titanic. He made this movie, Avatar. It's about these blue people, but they're not people at all. Well, one of them isn't a person at all. He's an avatar being operated by some military fella somehow. I forget the exact details. It's very good though. It's this military fella and he's got an avatar on another planet occupied by blue people. Seemingly primitive blue people, but for some reason, spoiler alert, the blue people are on another planet. Oh no, wait, that's not a spoiler. You know that the minute you walk into the movie. There's blue people on another planet and they're going around doing stuff. They're hunting and they're flying through the air and they're doing all sorts of impressive things, such as lecturing us about our planet. The whole movie turns into a lecture about our planet. It says, you fuckers are fucking up your planet. Look at these blue people. They don't even exist and they're doing it better than us. That's what it tells us. And then it says, now go watch Titanic. That's what happens when you're not a blue person and you go try and do stuff that you're not qualified to do. You put together a ship. You get this, the Titanic. I know there's been several movies about the story of the sinking of the Titanic, but there's one in particular that came out in the 1990s or thereabouts. And it was about some woman, some old woman. And she goes and meets up with these people who are looking into the remains of the Titanic, trying to dredge up old shit from under the sea. And this woman says, oh, I was involved in that old shit that's under the sea. That old shit is part of my legacy. Well, not really legacy, because it left under the sea 80 years ago. But in a way, it's part of my legacy, just in a storytelling way, I suppose. So let's go back now and spend the next 2.5 hours depicting my story through the art of cinema. That's what she says. And then we flick back 80 or 100 years, however long ago the Titanic was at the time, and we're showing the whole story of the Titanic. There's this fella, he's from Ireland or somewhere, and he's on his way to America. And there's some woman who's rich or something, and she's on her way to America too with her family, who all think he's scum, and he thinks they're all rich. the two of them get together and they all drown each other. Your one ends up managing to survive, clinging to a bit of wood, and he ends up managing to die a long, slow, painful death. She goes asleep for a bit and she wakes up and he's dead in the water. And then she says, "Oh Christ, he's dead. He's fucking dead. Christ almighty, he's dead. And I'm here on this bit of wood. I'm alive and he's dead." Which means 80 years from now, when I'm telling this story, he's going to be 80 years dead. And I'm going to be like a paedophile because I'll be telling people I'll be 90 years of age and I'll be telling all these historians about that fella I met on the Titanic, except he's 20 years of age and I'm 90. So I'm going to look terrible. Going to embarrass my family. I know they were embarrassed enough already by my association with this fella. If they think it's bad now, it's going to get even worse 90 years from now. Now, admittedly, a lot of the family will be dead by then, so there is that. And hopefully the newer generation will be more open to shit like that. So that's what you're one taught. And that's the story of the Titanic, as depicted in the movie by James Cameron. He built one side of the Titanic ship, for what I understand, and he told all the people when they were walking around on deck, "We're going to film you walking around on deck, and now we're going to film what the ship looks like from the other side." And they made them do some movement where they do mirror versions of whatever they were doing, and everyone got confused. That's what I understand from the documentary I watched about this movie last week anyway. Going to spend €8 billion making the replica of the Titanic. And then he realised, wait, €8 billion is a lot. I'm just going to make one side of the ship. So it'll only be 5 billion. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking if it's 8 billion for a full ship, surely it should be only 4 billion for half a ship. Well, that's very financially naive of you. That's not how the world works. You buy stuff in bulk or in larger quantities and sizes, it's cheaper per unit. So if you buy 2 halves of a ship, it's cheaper per half than buying 1 half of a ship on its own. And they say, why don't you go the whole hog and buy 2 halves of a ship? I'll tell you what, I'll give you a discount. Each half of the ship will be only 4 billion if you buy both halves. You can buy timeshare apartments, you can buy shares in things. I presume you can buy a share in a holiday yacht. A yacht. Can you buy half a yacht or a share in a yacht? It's a yacht. Yacht. Oh, Christ. I still don't know how to say that word. Beginning with Y and ending with T, it usually refers to a private luxury mini ship owned by a family or a rich person. It's a yacht. It's a yacht. 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 I've heard it many times on television. Surely I should know how to say it, but no, I don't. I have no idea. It's a yacht. Yuck. Yuck. It's not yak. I did a whole episode of this podcast last year centered around yaks. I was able to say yaks, no problem. But that's definitely a completely different thing than a yacht. Is it a yacht? Maybe I'm overthinking it. I am actually saying it perfectly correctly. Maybe it is yacht. Is it? Can it possibly be yacht? Suppose it could. YACH. I also watched a documentary last week about so-called Yacht Rock, 1970s and early 80s American light rock music that has now been designated as Yacht Rock. And basically it's shit. It's boring old shit. But there's some comedian who's going around who thinks it's all great. He says, here's how I define yacht rock. That's yacht rock and that's not yacht rock. And he seemed to be saying that if it was blues-based light rock, it might be yacht rock. But if it's country-based rock, then it's not yacht rock. Something along those lines. Not one of the more interesting documentaries I've ever watched, but I watched it all the way through anyway. Christopher Cross was categorized as one of the chief proponents of yacht rock. Who else? Boring American bands that come up on every fucking rock stream now from the 70s because they think I'll be interested in that. They say, I put into Spotify now, I'll say, I'm interested in rock. And they'll show me this shit from the 70s. I'd begun to watch this documentary. I thought, oh, yacht rock. I had assumed that meant the type of music referred to in the film and book American Psycho. The American Psycho was depicted as being into certain types of bands, such as Phil Collins. It turns out Yacht Rock is even more boring than that. So that's interesting, or it's not interesting. Either way, that's Yacht Rock for you. Two cats walk into a bar. One of the cats says, "Hello, a pint of your finest Guinness, please." And the man behind the bar says, "Certainly, sir, a pint of my finest Guinness coming right up. I'll put it into this glass here." Well, that's what I'll do. I'll get this glass and I'll dispense the Guinness into this glass. And the cat says, "You don't need to talk me through it. You're not trading me in for a job here. I'm not looking to be trained as an assistant to you. If I was, I'd be looking to take your job. I wouldn't become an assistant to anyone." And the man behind the bar says, "I know. I'm trying to foster a culture of openness in this bar. I think it's important that an establishment that's involved in food preparation, because beverages are food. You pour them down your gullet into your body, therefore they're food. I think it's important to foster an environment of openness as regards how we prepare the food." And that's just what I'm doing here. So I'm pouring the Guinness into this glass. I've washed my hands. I washed my hands a few minutes ago after I went for a piss. And the cat says, "Oh, now that's interesting. Does that mean if you hadn't gone for a piss a few minutes ago, you would now be preparing my beverage with unwashed hands?" And the barman says, "Oh, that's an interesting question. In that instance, I would have clean hands. Unwashed in that they haven't been washed recently, but they're clean. If I haven't just come from the bathroom, then I haven't pissed on my hands, so they don't need to be washed. I only piss on my hands when I go into the bathroom, so they're only unsafe from the time between I finish urinating and I get to the tap. From then on, they're fine. They're completely clean. And before I go into the bathroom, they're completely clean as well, because I'm not up to anything else while I'm on the job here. So you don't need to worry about that." And the cat says, "Oh, that's great. You know, a normal species just licks itself continuously. You're just washing yourself as the need arises. We're washing continuously. I'm constantly licking myself. I'm applying spit to every inch of my fur. I'm completely covered in saliva. At any one time, you could come up to me and touch me and you get saliva straight on you. Clean saliva. You do use saliva for bathing, don't you, sir?" And the barman says, "No, actually, no, I don't use saliva for bathing. When people spit on each other, it's not considered a good thing in the context of hostility." Wait, was that the word? Hostility. Being a hostilier. Hostelry. In the hostelry industry. Wait, this isn't a hostel. Or isn't there a thing? Not hostelry. I can never remember the word. Someone who entertains guests in a public house. There's a word for that. I'm sure there is. Same thing you call a bed and breakfast house owner. There's a word for that. And the cat says, "Why don't you just write down the word? If it's that important to you, if it's that much part of your identity, why don't you write it down and have it on a little cue card in front of you?" Because I'm sure it comes up quite a lot. It's coming up with me in conversation. I'm a cat. And you bring it up with me within your first minute of conversing with me. I'm sure it's a word you use a lot. So why don't you write it down? And the barman says, "I thought of that some time ago. I thought I'd better write down that word, because they seem to be trying to draw on it a lot. I've had the pen and paper ready at my disposal since I had that thought, and I still can't remember the word, so I can't write it down until I remember it. Now, of course, I only have to remember it once, and then I write it down, and then we're done. But still, no, it's not hostility, it's hospitality. I'm in the hospitality industry. So that means I'm what am I, a hospitaliteer? No, that's still not right. There's another word. There's another word for that. And hospitaliteer, I don't think that's even a word. I am in the hospitality industry. I am providing hospitality, but there must be a word that's like hospitaliteer, but I don't think it's based on the word hospitality. I think there's another one that I still haven't thought of yet. And the cat says, "Well, write down the hospitality thing anyway. It might help jog your memory at some point." And the barman says, "Oh, that's a good idea. I'll write it down. I'll write it down using my biro here." And the cat says, "What's a biro?" Just for any foreigners listening. Oh, a biro, just another word for a disposable ballpoint pen. The pen with a ball on it. You're not really pointing at anything, you're just rolling the nib over everything. It's like having a wheel. When they're painting the line along the middle of the road, the thing they use for that, I presume anyway, the thing they use on wheels where they apply the paint using a wheel, I presume that's on a similar principle to ballpoint pens. Although now that I think about it, that goes along a straight line, so it only has to go in one direction, back or forwards. So maybe that's not as flexible as a ballpoint pen nib. Because a ballpoint pen nib presumably has to be able to move in all directions. In all directions. It's a bit like the ball on the underside of a mouse. Now, not a laser mouse, the type you cats play with, no. The old style mouse that just had a ball underneath it, a bit like that. I don't know if you've ever opened up a Rubiks Cube. Have you, cat? And the cat says, no, I've never opened up a Rubiks Cube. That's considered cheating where I come from. The only reason to open up a Rubiks Cube is to reassemble it in its original form so that all the colours are back where they were at the very beginning before you shuffled everything. And that's cheating. That is cheating. And the barman says, you've got a very suspicious mind, cat. You know that. There's perfectly legitimate reasons to open up the Rubik's Cube. You might have to do it to repair it. You might do it just to study it, to demonstrate to a school child who's trying to do a project to demonstrate how the Rubik's Cube works. If you see a mechanic disassembling a car or a medical student disassembling a cadaver, you don't immediately accuse them of cheating, do you? And the cat says, no, I don't. But I don't come across those things very much. I don't hang around in medical schools or garages where they disassemble cars. Why would I do that? And the man behind the bar says, I don't know. Maybe they're owned by the type of people who like to hand out bits of meat to stray cats. And the cat says, excuse me, I don't go around begging for food. And the barman says, oh, I suppose you don't. You're able to hold down a bar tab here, so you're probably independently wealthy, or at least financially independent. And the cat says, I am indeed, and financially independent. And the barman says, wait a minute, you are going to pay this tab, aren't you? And the cat says, no, I'm not going to pay this tab. You've opened up a tab for me as I asked, and that's very kind of you, so thank you. I'm not a member of human society, so it's not stealing because I can't be considered a thief. And the man behind the bar says, oh, you can't have this beverage then. And the cat says, I think you'll find I can. I've just spat into it, so what are you going to do with it? And the barman says, oh, that's fine. As we've established, your spit is very clean. You've effectively cleaned the glass for me. That's great. I just have to pour it out now. And, well, I might put it in the dishwasher anyway, just for appearance's sake.
Are you going into your head?
Once upon a time, there was a dog. 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 Basically a dog. And this dog, he was walking along the street one day. Well, I say the street. It was called the street, but this was in America where everything is called a street. I've been in places in America where you're out in the middle of nowhere. You're about 100 miles from the nearest metropolis, and you'll be on some road and it'll be called Young Street or something. The Canadians are good at this as well. There's a road in Toronto that's called, it's either Toronto or Montreal. There's a road called something like Young Street. And you can be on Young Street and be 50 miles away from the fucking town and you're still on Young Street. You're looking at sheep and cattle in a field at the side of the road and you're walking along a dirt track and that's still a continuation of Young Street and it's also the main thoroughfare of some huge city like Toronto, but it also goes out the country to the middle of nowhere. You can be on Young Street and be in the middle of a desert. You can be on Young Street and be at the North Pole and it's still the same street. So you see a house number and it's number 8,952,762 flat B. and that's on Young Street. So you can have that. I'm sure it's perfectly fine. It works fine for you Americans because you think of the whole world as a grid, so every street goes all the way around the world. You put your streets along the lines of latitude and longitude. I think you have your longitude as a street and your lines of latitude are all avenues. And you have something like that. And it works out fine for you until you realise you don't own the whole world. So when you follow a street and try to follow it all the way around the world, you soon discover you're in someone else's country or else you're on the seabed. If you follow a street long enough from America and it goes under the Atlantic and you end up on some old street in the mystical buried continent of Atlantis where everyone's dead, it's all drowned, 3 miles under the sea and you still think you're on the same street that you started on. I do know you have very long streets though. You have very long streets and they go on for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. Miles and 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 miles, and then they go on for kilometers because you followed it all the way into some other country where they use metric like normal people. Think, oh, this is very modern. Does that mean the street is shorter here or longer? So you go, I followed this road for 850 miles and 79 kilometers. Now, do I add them together or keep them separate or what? Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. It's a free country. You're free to do whatever you want. I presume you get to some border somewhere where there's a sign saying you are now crossing from miles into kilometers. And there's going to be a problem if you don't pay attention to that. You want to follow the speed limits. They'll know if you're breaking the speed limit because they'll go, oh, you got here. You got here a lot sooner than you should have. What time did you leave at? That's what the cops do now. They will try to figure out whether you're being speeding. And they don't have an easy way to do it. They don't have their measuring devices on them. They say, what time did you leave your house at? Show me your ID. I want to see where you live. Tell me, what time did you leave your house at? And don't lie, because we'll check. You tell them what time you left your house at. They'll figure out how far you've come since then, and then they'll figure out the distance you've come and how much you've covered. Now, maybe you can somehow convince them you haven't been speeding, you just found a shortcut. And the shortcut wasn't stepping down on the accelerator and making the car go faster. No, you have to convince them that you're intelligent enough to have found a shortcut that not even the cops are aware of. It might be worth taking one of those training courses that they do. The London taxi drivers are famous for doing it. They all take this test called the knowledge, and they learn every inch of London. They don't use maps or technology or hideous navigation apparatuses to just memorize the whole place. Maybe if you had convinced them that you've done that, tell the cops, I've done the... In fact, instead of convincing them, just actually do it. And for once in your life, you have at least one thing that you don't have to lie about. You'll actually have done that test, the London taxi driver's knowledge test. You say, yes, I've done the London knowledge taxi driver's test. I can show you the certificate if you like, officer. And as a result, I'm very good at finding my way around. Now, I know this isn't London, this is Canada or wherever I said I was. But those skills translate to anywhere. Once you've learned how to conquer a city, you can conquer anywhere. And then, of course, the cop will probably think you're talking about invading. They say, wait a minute, are you a terrorist? And you'll say, no, I'm just a taxi driver. It's very much not the same thing. Well, I'm not a taxi driver, but I did train as one. I know my way around the road system. Like you say in New York, if you can make it here, you'll make it anywhere. So if you can make it in London in the cab driver knowledge test, you can make it anywhere. Try that on them. Say, you know the way you have a thing, you Americans, you New Yorkers anyway, you have a thing where you say, if you can make it there, you'll make it anywhere. It's up to you, New York, New York. And also, of course, you can argue that New York is based on Old York. There's a place in England called York, so why can't there be a place that's New London? Why not? Of course, remember you're in Canada now, are you? I can't remember where this story is set, but be careful, you might be in Canada, so maybe don't do the New York thing there. They'll just think you're being a you have an asshole. Which you are. You're speeding and trying to get out of it. You've gone to great lengths to try and get out of a simple speeding accusation. Why not just tell the truth for once, see how it feels? You might like it. Try saying, "Officer, yes, I was speeding. I was speeding." And don't apologise to them, because that's a bit fake. People do this thing, they get caught speeding and say, "Yes, I'm sorry, officer, I'm very sorry." Like that helps somehow, like you've personally offended the police officer by speeding on their roads or something. No, they're not there to tell you that they take personal offence at you speeding. No, they're enforcing the law. If anyone, you should be apologising to your fellow road users. You should say, "Officer, I'll stop the next 100 people that come along this road and apologise to each of them individually as fellow road users." And the cop says, "Oh, that's interesting." You can suggest that to the judge, see what they think. It's not really for me to decide whether that's going to work as a punishment, because we have separation of the judiciary system and the policing system here in this country, because we're civilised. And you'll say, "Oh, I see. Anyway, are we done here, officer?" They'll say, "No, here's your ticket." It's like you're going into the cinema. When we're going into the cinema, they give you a ticket. When you're caught speeding, they give you a ticket. That's ridiculous. A ticket is something you buy to gain entry to something. You're not going to buy something to gain entry to a course. No. What they're giving you there is a bill. It's an open bill because it's yet to be decided how your punishment is going to be settled. It's like the opposite of a blank check. They're giving you a blank invoice. The judge will decide what happens with it. Say, "Judge, you fill in the blanks here. Here's an invoice for this fella's crimes, this fella's alleged crimes. I'm going to send you to the court with this," and the judge will write in there what your punishment is, if anything, and then he'll sign it. Might turn out to be an invoice for zero, in which case you're very lucky, because I know damn well you were speeding. You didn't get from there to here in this amount of time without speeding, unless you can fly, I suppose. And even if you're flying, I presume there are speed limits in the air, especially for ordinary citizens like you. You can't just be going whatever speed you like. Air travel is highly regulated, so I presume they have rules and regulations regarding speed. Maybe just for fun, I'll imply on the ticket that I'm writing for you that I'm not even sure whether you were speeding or doing the drug colloquially known as speed. That'll at least make it more fun for you, give the judge more options. And it's a fair thing to do there, because I'm being even less specific. I'm leaving it open for the judiciary system. I'm not even saying whether you were speeding or doing a drug. I'm saying, here's the evidence. I found this fella. I found evidence that he was doing speed. I don't know whether it was the drug speed or the driving offence speed. So I'm being even less specific and leaving it up to the judiciary system, which is the fair thing to do. I don't know whether he's doing speed or going very fast, or even whether it's airspeed that's involved. I'll just be as vague as possible. I'll just provide the evidence, which is that you left your house at this time and you're here at this time and this is this distance away. Should probably put down what the wind speeds were today. I'll get the records from the meteorological service. I'll put them on the ticket as well. And then the judge can decide for himself, and you can defend yourself however you want. I won't get involved at all. And you'll say to that, you say, "Oh, that's very reasonable of you. Thank you, officer." And you'll say, "You're very welcome." And then you'll all go off about your business. And that'll be great. Goodbye.